and welcome to Optics, featured artist in the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM. I'm Krista Dix, the Executive Director of the Griffin Museum of Photography, and we're thrilled you have joined us to hear from our featured artist here at WinCAM, Iaritza Menjivar. The Griffin Museum is based in Winchester, including our satellite gallery here at WinCAM. Iaritza Menjivar is a fine art and commercial photographer and storyteller. Her photographs allow us to see the world differently, immersive and personal, whether working for the Washington Post and other clients or in her own work, telling her family history, as we will discuss today in her series, First Generation. Welcome, Iaritza.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Krista.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the series that's on the walls here at WinCAM?
Sure. So First Generation is a project about my family. First generation immigrants from El Salvador and Guatemala, and first generation American who are like my siblings, my cousins, and myself who were born here in the United States. And basically it's just a story, their life story, and their daily life and what that represents here in the United States as immigrants.
But it's also your daily life as well, because you're immersing yourself in this large family. How big is your family? Because when I look at those images, it seems like there are a lot of people there.
I know. There's a lot of them. I have a fairly large family, and I have like cousins. I have a bunch of siblings. My parents are separated, so they have their own families too. And I guess what we would consider in America an extended family is like our immediate family as well. Mm-hmm. So that's why I feel like in the images, it feels like there's a lot of people, because we, you know, in the Latino community, we stick together, and we rely on each other, and we are our own community in a way. So
I know that many families try to stick within a certain radius. Is all of your family still based here in the Boston area?
Yes and no. I have family that lives in Chelsea, Everett, Saugus, Lawrence, so around this area, but we also have family in LA. We have family living in Maryland, and a lot of my family too still lives in El Salvador and Guatemala.
So what was the impetus for the move from Guatemala to the United States?
So both my parents have a different story. And my mother left Guatemala when she was 16 years old. She had a pretty rough upbringing. She lived in a very, very poor, her family was very poor. And sometimes I share the stories of like what she's told me. Like sometimes they wouldn't have food on their table, and what they would have was a tortilla with salt. Like they come from a very poor background. And my mother always, as you hear in Latin America, you hear these stories of El Norte, which is the north, mm-hmm. The United States, and how it's like this, it's like a wonderful place, and you're free, and there's money, and there's work, which is different from what they have there. So she grew up with this idea that El Norte was a magical place, and even at a young age, now that I think of, like 16 years old, moving to a different country, not knowing the language, not having any family here in the United States, that's a big step. And I asked her, like, what motivated you to leave? And her response was, I just didn't want to live here anymore. She didn't want to continue in her family's footsteps of being poor. She wanted to build something for herself, so she left. There's other reasons that I won't disclose in her name, but like, there's other rough things that really pushed her out of her mm-hmm. home as well. And then my father left El Salvador because after the Civil War ended in El Salvador, there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of gang violence. My family lost their farms, they lost their lands in Chalatenango. So they migrated to San Salvador, which is the main city. And there they started from nothing again. So my father, being one of the oldest of his siblings, decided to move here to help out their family back home. And he ended up just staying and providing for them there and building his family here.
So what is it like to have multiple generations in one location in, my family's pretty spread out, like all over the country. We don't have a sense of family in the same sort of way that you living and being surrounded by generations of your family. How is that family life inform your photography?
Well, they teach us loyalty to each other, right? Like they teach us that family is everything, right? So we depend on each other for things. And like growing up, my mother and my father, they had me when they were very young, and they were themselves accommodating to their life to the American lifestyle and what that meant for them. But in that process, they never learned the language. They didn't, they struggled with technology as it comes, right? So I feel like they always taught us that family was the core for all of us. Like any decision you make, like you talk to your parents first, and I think togetherness is like, I guess, the word that I'm looking for, and you like develop this idea that if you aren't part of this family, you kind of feel guilty, right? Because you're letting them down. And they sacrificed, right, the big sacrifice of them leaving their country, being an immigrant here, working, low-wage jobs, and them like my father, he's worked jobs where he's cleaning bathrooms and stuff like. So doing that kind of work, which it was a sacrifice because he was an electrician back in El Salvador, but he didn't do that here. And so in my mind, I always felt like I needed to support him however way I could, because he did the best that he could to provide for me and my family. So I think that idea is what keeps us all together. And now as an adult, I'm learning that there should be boundaries, and that maybe loyalty and togetherness and being so devoted to your family isn't always healthy for your mental health.
Wow.
And I think that that's a separate conversation. But in this project, what I want to show is that that we are there for each other, and we can't rely on the government. We can't rely on our neighbors sometimes, specifically, talking about like that era, the Trump era, where people really came out with racism and discrimination, and so we can't rely on anybody else but ourselves, because we know that we won't let each other down.
One of the things that I love about your work is that we feel like we're in the room with you and with your family. There's a certain sense of intimacy. There's a certain sense of anonymity. How do you place yourself in that family and be able to take the photos that you can and still give us this beautiful sense of who you are and who your family is? When I was working on this project, the main years that I worked on this project a lot, which was like 8-9 years, getting out of college and all that, I spent a lot of time with my family. And I think that comes through in the images, the fact that I want to be present with them. And so what I try is when I'm actively photographing for this project is to spend a lot of time with them, is to sit down on the couch and watch TV. And I want to be able to show the truth and what really our daily life is. And that requires a lot of time. So I think spending time with them, also. Do you hide your camera at all? Do you just leave it on a table? Do you carry it with you, and everyone around is comfortable with that?
Yeah, so I'll have my camera with me at all times. Like I used to walk around the living room when we had dinner, my camera was right next to me on the table. And that was on purpose, because at the beginning of the project, they didn't want their picture taken, right? Like anybody, like you put your hand up, you're like, no, don't take my picture, or I look like crap right now, or like, ni me he bañado, no me he vestido, no me he puesto nada, like I haven't put makeup on, I'm still in my bathrobe, why are you taking pictures of me? So at the beginning, there was a lot of that, and over time, they just got used to me, and they're like, all right, there comes Iaritza again with her camera, like whatever, and then they'll start posing and doing all these, like the kids loved it. The kids were all over it, and I think it comes from spending a lot of time together and showing what family was, you know, like, I'm going to go back to it, spending time together. In Spanish, there's a word for it. It's called convivencia. There's not a word for it in English, but essentially what it means is being together, spending time together again, but also, you know, enjoying each other's presence. And that builds a relationship, that builds trust.
How do you feel that your photography, that your personal vision has changed over the length of the project? So where it started, it was one idea, and now 8-9 years later, it's something else entirely. What do you feel has changed? How do you feel that your vision has changed in that time?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I think that, well, what I feel is photography is very personal for me. This project is obviously very personal for me as well, but in general, like having a camera, having a tool to share my feelings and emotions and having a conversation about very vulnerable things in my life, right? Like my family or myself. And photography has been a tool for me to also learn about myself and to learn about my family and what my place is in our family and in this world, right? Like, so I think that my photography, my vision has changed as I have changed, for the better or the worse, I don't know. But so at the beginning, it was a lot of that guilt, you know, going to college and trying to get a job and trying to give back to my family because they gave so much to me. And that's what the project really concentrated on, right? Was their sacrifices, essentially my sacrifices, my cousin's sacrifices, and what we give back to them. And as time passed, it was a lot about not thinking my family as a whole, but then I started to look at them as individuals, and that's a lot where my portraiture came through. And then I focused on each person individually and what their story was. And throughout that time too, I had to travel back to El Salvador and Guatemala, and I was able to also document photographs of my family living there, which is work that I never showed because for me it didn't feel like something that I needed to bring out just yet.
And that's what we have here in the gallery.
Exactly. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that journey. What was that like for you as a very American person going back to the land of your family?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a culture shock. It was my first time going through Guatemala. I was 12 years old, and I got bitten by mosquitoes all over. Like you couldn't see my skin. It was just mosquito bites everywhere. Another thing that happened to me that's kind of hilarious is I was playing tag with my cousins, and I ended up running through these like trees on the floor. I thought they were just branches, but they ended up being thorns. So my leg got all cut up. So those are like very superficial, shocking things that happened immediately when I got there. But also just knowing that my family's home back then when I was 12, it was a much better rendition of what it was when my mother lived there, which was, you know, over many years ago. I'm not going to do the math. But, yeah. But they had floors in their homes, right? And that's something that my mother didn't grow up with. So thinking about that difference and to go to the bathroom was outdoors in a separate room, and you had to bring a bucket of water with you every time you went to the bathroom, and that's how you would flush the toilet. Like, those are very superficial things, but it was shocking for me as a first generation American, knowing that I just go right next door and the bathroom's there and you push a button and it flushes. And also my family in Guatemala is very religious, so church every day. And I kind of grew up going to church, but it wasn't as intense as it is for them. So also thinking about that difference was shocking.
So what did your family in Guatemala think of you with a camera?
They didn't like it.
No?
No.
So it was a lot harder to create images?
Yeah, because here I think we're used to also like taking pictures with our phones and stuff. And I don't know, my family, obviously I have years of me being around them with the camera. When I'm there and I have a camera, it's not the same idea. It's, you know, actually, I'm glad we're bringing this up because the first things that they would tell me is like, no, I'm going to end up being a meme on Facebook. And it's so sad to think about that because a lot of people make fun of indigenous people, right? And my family, I'm indigenous, my family's indigenous. And, you know, our features, Guatemalans get made, there's a stereotype, they get a lot of racist jokes about their height, about their color of skin. And that was the first thing that came to that they would bring up to me. It's like, no, I don't want to end up being a meme in the United States on Facebook somewhere. And that's so valid, right? Like,
it is. Did you help them see what it was that you were seeing in the work, since it's digital photography?
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I travel with a film camera, so I don't have the option of turning the camera around and showing somebody what I've just photographed. So it's a lot harder for me. But when you've got a digital camera, it's almost like an instant gratification saying, this is what I'm seeing.
Exactly.
This is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And did that help in any way try to ease the pressure of trying to take those photographs in that location?
Yes, definitely. And another thing that I also did was I'd let them use the camera and I'd let them take pictures of me, because your subject is only going to be, or I like to call them, the people I take pictures of, collaborators. So your collaborator is only going to feel as comfortable as you are in front of a camera. So I tried to let them use the camera. I specifically took this one and I was like, you take it, you take pictures, you do what you want with it. And then they would get bored of it and they'd give it back to me, and then it was more okay.
Yeah.
It was easier to take pictures of the kids, of course, like they were more okay with it, but even the kids would give me, no, like I don't want my picture out there, like, so it was hard, but it wasn't impossible.
So what does your family think of the work that you've done now? I mean, how proud, I know that being a photographer is never usually high on the list of job opportunities, right? Be a doctor, be a lawyer. So what does your family think about you as a working photographer?
My mother was always extremely supportive. She's like, whatever you want to do, you do, and you're going to be successful because you're you. That's what she always told me. So I always appreciated that encouragement from her. My father's side was a little different. They were, you know, they were like, well, how are you going to make money with this? Like, are you going to put a studio up? Like, but, you know, they were supportive in their own way, and I appreciated the questions that they asked, because they're realistic questions, and they were trained to be realistic people because they had to always think about survival. Mm-hmm. So I think that their intentions with those questions were valid, because they wanted me to think about how I was going to build a future for myself with my career. But now they're like, they love the fact that I've been able to do so many things with photography. Mm-hmm. And the family project itself, like First Generation, you know, they're like, you're still taking pictures of us, like you're still showing those images. I thought that was just for college. And I'm like, no, like this is way past that now. Yeah. And I've explained to them that it's about the immigrant conversation and bringing our life to the light, and how important that is in our community now because of the political situation that is active. And
exposure is like knowledge, and knowledge is power.
Exactly.
Right? So that you can change the conversation. Mm-hmm. If you could have a conversation with somebody about what the work is about and what you want us as viewers to take away with from seeing your work, what would that be?
I want the people in my pictures and people who look like them to feel empowered and to feel like they have a right to express their voice and their experiences, that their experiences are valid, and that you're not going to end up as a meme on Facebook somewhere. Like, this is going to bring an important conversation that everybody needs to hear, and not just, you know, people outside of our community, but we need to hear it for ourselves. Otherwise, how will we feel important? How will we feel like we fit into this world, right? And I feel like I learned that through my photography as well, is like, I'm also valid, like I'm important in this world, and these are the reasons why. And I want people to feel that way too when they see people that look like us in the images in a gallery somewhere.
When you were featured in the New York Times or in the Washington Post, and when your family sees where you've gone with your photography, do they see the trajectory from those family images to you being a storyteller and talking about others in the same intimate way, in the same way that we would feel like we're in someone else's living room?
Their thoughts on, first of all, the publication was when the project first started, so the New York Times one, and it was like the first time that they saw, not that they saw the work, they knew about the work, but that they read kind of like my perspective on the project. And there is like a comment in there in the article that mentions like, my mother like wanted me to get married and have kids, and she's always told me that, but when she read that, she's like, that's not the only way that I see you. And it was nice because the article was also translated in Spanish, so she read it as my voice, and that stuck with her, right? And she made sure that I understood that that's not how, that wasn't the only way she saw me. Like, she saw me as a successful woman that came from our family. And I think that when they see the images, I think that they do see that it's about family and togetherness and supporting each other, but they also see it as someone in our family is doing something outside of her comfort zone, and something that in a way represents something bigger, right? Mm-hmm. And I think essentially that's what they see, but in their way, they appreciate the images and they appreciate the work, and they understand that it's necessary.
Yeah. So how did you pick up a camera? I mean, what moved you to be a photographer, to have that dream?
I sucked at everything else.
I cannot imagine that is anywhere remotely close to true, but
I'm not like a mathematician or a scientist. Like, I hate reading, so history was not a great one. No, but all joking aside, I was going to not go to school, like college, mm-hmm. after high school, and my track coach from high school, he was like, there's no way that you're not gonna go to school. What do you like to do? I was like, well, I guess I'm kind of good at arts. I have a camera that I like using. And he's like, let's visit schools and see like what school you can do, like you can afford and like to do photography. And I was like, I guess. But actually even before that, the reason why I've always liked the arts, but somebody at the church that I used to go to when I was younger, I like had this like thing where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, right? And then this person was like, I don't know why, but I feel like I need to give you this camera. And I took that as a sign. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I went on the college tours, and I ended up going to Lesley University, which ended up being a great networking place for me. I met so many amazing people, including one of the best people in my life, Stella Johnson. And it was the best decision I could make. Yeah.
Well, we're all grateful to you for finally picking up that camera, no matter what reason. But here's another question for you. As a young photographer, what advice would you give to those coming up behind you? How do you move forward right now in a world full of images and stand out?
Yeah, I think one big lesson I learned is being open to doing multiple things. I know extremely successful photographers that live off their freelance work, and they hustle, right? Like, they have their wedding businesses, they have, I'm thinking specifically of Dan Aguirre and Zeb Fisher, like they're incredible photographers who live off their photography. So you have to be open to not living, I guess, from personal projects sometimes. Some people do it and they're amazing at it, but there's other options, and I think being open to that, doing event photography, doing wedding photography. I work in arts administration. My full-time job is, help working with other artists in other fields, and
so you get to help give a leg up to the next generation.
Exactly.
And provide opportunities.
Yeah.
Do you see new opportunities coming up for artists that they should be aware of?
Yes, actually, Main Media Workshops they exhibit with the Griffin Museum.
The Arnold Newman Prize. Yeah.
Their thing is open right now.
The submission period for that is open until I think today.
Yes, so that's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
I work for the Somerville Arts Council, and we specifically give out project grants for anybody that's local, and the only thing is that your project has to be done somewhere in Somerville. But that grant opportunity comes up in September and October, so that's something to look into. But yeah, if any muralist artists are looking at this, we always need public art projects in Somerville. So.
Definitely
Yeah.
public art projects.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you want to tell us about the series, about where it's headed next? What do you think the next generation of first generation is going to be?
I think right now I'm focusing on trying to execute the project, so showing them at different exhibitions. That's kind of like where my main focus is with the project right now. Further on my own other personal projects, I have some things that I'm working on, but it's more personal, that's not ready to be released yet. But the project's called Sonríe Dijo Mamá, and it's something that I'm working on, and that will come when it's time. But what I want to say is that First Generation Raíces is it's a project that's a branch from First Generation, which are the images that are shown here today at WinCAM. And these images are from my travels to Guatemala, and what I would like for people to see is where my family comes from, and props to them that came from a very countryside place, and they're here now, and they're doing great things. So those are our roots.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure learning more about the series and about you as well. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Optics, featured artist in the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM. Iaritza Menjivar's beautiful work, First Generation Raíces, is on the walls of WinCAM until September 9th, and is free and open to the public during WinCAM's regular hours of operation. WinCAM is located at 32 Swanton Street here in Winchester. For more information on the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM or other programs offered through the Griffin Museum, log on to our website at griffinmuseum.org. Thanks for watching.